That's awesome. So for those who don't know, Caprice from Chicago, born and raised, south side of Chicago, hellraiser, put his mom and his family through hell by being a wild man, but basically raised by the streets with a mentality of what can I get from me? What do I, what, you know, and that didn't start that way. You and David did an amazing pre-interview, and I don't even want to have to go. I think we're going to publish some of that, you know, clips of that because it was awesome. I listened to that. I was like, this is you. This is your story. This is raw. This is vulnerable. And it taught me a lot. It also gave me a rub too, because now I know who stole my shoes at Oak Street Beach. You were telling a story about one of those things as a kid. You got to get some new shoes and feel fitting in the class, and you went and hacked some shoes at one of the beaches or whatever. And I remember I was telling these guys in Chicago recently a story about like my grandmother being like, she worked hard and she would spend her last time on us when we came into town. It was a 4th of July weekend. And I came into town, and of course I wanted to have the Nikes, man. I had to have the pumps, the Air Jordans, the kicks. It was like being fed to us at that age. So she goes and she splurges. She was like, what? How much for these shoes? And she did it. She bought me the shoes. And then my aunt took us all out to Oak Street Beach to go to the beach. Of course, I took off the shoes and left them sitting by all of our stuff by the bench. Came back, I had no shoes. And I thought of that when I heard you telling that story. It's great. But you went in deep about, you know, your core and your history and growing up. So give us like a quick, boil that down into what is your couple minutes of like, here's where I came from, what it was like for me. And then we'll get into like what happened and what it's like now. And I really want to know about where you're going. So that's our structure for today's chat. So
Yeah, so I first of all, it wasn't me for Oak Street
I know
Beach.
it wasn't you. That was two different era. But, yeah.
But I mean, that is an example of how things cycles continue to pass on. Because I'm a little older than you.
Yep.
And it was Filas back then. It
Oh,
was back
yeah,
in,
the
we talking about
Filas.
1988.
Yep.
And so, but you know, those patterns still continue until someone comes in and begin to start changing the trajectory of what people should actually aim for. So my life story basically started out as a young black man in Chicago in what's called the Black Belt. Well, that's what it originally was back in the 70s, in the 50s, I mean. But in the 70s, it was called
Dan Ryan or something?
Yeah, Dan Ryan. But that was the Black Belt when the people migrated from Mississippi, from the South, into Chicago back then. And I live in the neighborhood now. I lived in the neighborhood that's now called Bronzeville.
Yep.
So I was born in that neighborhood before it was called Bronzeville. But the statue of the premise of like those buildings, the structures of those buildings, those mansions, all of that was over that end. But I truly believe like what took place, what made us be able to ones living in those buildings when I was growing up at that point was probably white flight. You know, like, because I don't think the blacks had those mansions and stuff like that before, before the 50s. You know, we moved in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. But in that community, it wasn't no whites. It was all blacks.
So you're saying the blacks didn't build those buildings?
No.
It was built probably by the German or Irish workmen that were building that area, and then as they moved north or south or west or wherever they went,
yes,
they left behind the buildings, which then became populated by the folks from down in Mississippi or the area that they were migrating in for whatever reason that was happening then.
Yeah, but they was migrating in because like my grandmother and her husband at the time, she came with her husband, my great grandmother. She came because they needed work. So her husband helped build the Dan Ryan. So the Dan Ryan wasn't even there. He was a part of building it. And that's why they came.
That
they came for
required a
opportunities.
ton of people.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
And then he left and went back down south, but she stayed.
Okay.
And that's how.
And raised your mom and raised your family there.
My great grandmother was from my father's side, so I grew up on both sides of my family. My great grandmother was the matriarch of our family on my father's side, but my grandmother, which was my mother's mother, she migrated from the South, but then she didn't migrate from the South to Chicago. She migrated to California.
Okay.
And then from California to Chicago. But when she moved to Chicago, they moved on the west side of Chicago when the Henry Horner Projects was first built in 1960s.
Interesting.
Yeah, and she was one of the first black women to work at the post office. That's where she retired from.
Really?
Yeah, with where she
The
grew.
big
She
post office building that you
yeah
see it coming down
downtown.
290? Really?
Down
Yeah.
yeah
Careful with that
yeah.
cord
Okay, I'm
just to
sorry.
make sure you're not getting there.
But she also she came with she had 12 kids, and
Same guy.
yeah,
Wow.
and then she became a single mom with 12 kids,
Man.
and so it's dynamic, dynamics, right? So my mother, she grew up in the projects on the west side,
Yeah.
and then but they moved out south on the south side. I don't know what year exactly, but I just know I was born in 1977 on
Okay.
43rd Street, which is called the low end now. That's a term, right? It's called the low end, and I was a kid, man, that didn't understand nothing other than like where am I at? That's what I used to say to myself, like what, like I'm in the world, like where I'm at, what I'm supposed to do, and like who am I? Why am I here? Those was my like overarching thoughts, and I used to ask a lot of questions.
Still do. I love it.
My son is worse than me.
I know. He's great. He's great. I love him. He's the next gen, man.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting concept too. Listening to you and David chatting is like you feel like you've always had that curiosity of sense of place. And so what happened that brought you into the negative side of your past that brought you into the gangbang and GDs, the gangster disciples? Like, is that just because of the situation you were in, that snow globe or that petri dish or that neighborhood, and that's what people did?
And I think it's a mixture of things as I'm learning about life now. It's like if you was not exposed to certain things, you're gonna try to figure it out on your own
Mm-hmm.
because the need for survival is definitely there. You a slave to that just from birth. Like your human nature, you want survival and you want to fit in, you want to belong, and you may take a lot of wrong turns to try to find those things because ultimately you want to actually love too. You want love, and we search for it in all the wrong places. But what I noticed was that when my first traumatic experience, really the typical traumatic, well, it was a couple, but the deepest traumatic experience was when my mother had a nervous breakdown for the first time. I was 7 years old. But before that, I remember at maybe 5 or 6 years old, this was trauma for me. I saw my uncle, that's 11 years older than me. That's my dad's one of his younger brothers. He was a cool guy, slick guy. He was fun. And at 5 or 6 years old, I was coming from school, and he went to the school right across the street from my elementary school. He was in high school,
Okay.
and he was with all the big time lookers, and stuff, because he was a cool guy. And I was fascinated when I saw him, and I wanted to go hang out with them from school. And I only lived maybe 5 blocks away, but at that age, I was always navigating life for myself. Really, I go where I want to go.
Right.
So I walked home right in my neighborhood, by myself. But I seen them, and I was stopped to they like, hey, there go little Pre, man. What's up, little Pre, little Teddy? That's my dad name.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, how y'all doing? And I'm doing dancing or something, And then there was a woman. I didn't know who she was, but later on, and I found out. She said something about he needed to go home or something, and I said something to refute that. And then she started screaming at me, and then she ran out with a knife and to scare me. And then my uncle, he took me home that day. He was like, this and that, but I was mad and I felt violated. I felt like, why would they let me get attacked? In my mind, she was trying to attack me, but she didn't, and I found out who she was, who the mother she was.
Yeah.
At that time, she was just a scary woman to me. And why would they let her do that to me? And I think my turn in life came where I wanted to defend myself, and I always wanted to protect myself. And I wanted to protect my own self-interest, meaning I wanted to be with my uncle now. Why would she even say that I shouldn't be? This is my uncle. Stay out of my business type of thought process.
Yeah.
And so that was a traumatic moment for me. And as you could think, I remembered that, right? After all the stuff I've been through.
Yeah.
But then when I was 7 years old, that was really the biggest one because that was the first time I experienced abandonment issues, and also feeling like I had to fend for myself. And then it grew even more because not only fend for myself, I also felt I had to fend for what I thought was the perfect family look and what my life supposed to been in my mind. I wanted my mother to be respected. You know, I wanted her to be looked up to, you know, as far as like a person that fits in this world.
Yep.
But she was actually the black sheep. And her being the black sheep
Of
led
the
me.
12 siblings.
Yes. And that led me to want to defend her honor, you know, and like, I don't listen to nobody, you know, and then I painted this picture of my own man, how life gonna be. And then my mother wasn't able to set expectations for me because she wasn't even able to be sustainable with her own life, right? So that meant that I had to create my own expectations.
How many siblings do you have?
2.
2.
It's 3
Older,
of us.
Younger?
They younger.
Okay.
And I didn't have a big brother either.
Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't know how to be a big brother.
Right. So you had the conditions you were exposed to that kind of laid the path for what respect meant.
Yeah.
So you started to see it from the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still happening today in Chicago, in every large metropolitan community, all over. In Dubuque, you're seeing it, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But because you've transcended that, you're able to empathize with that and see where the people are at.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And another thing was, so I had an ability, and I call, you know, it's a calling to me that I wanted to help people. You know, when I was young, I wanted to help, but it was just I didn't understand like what true help supposed to meant because it really was not defined the right way. Because like growing up in those environments in Chicago, help meant hurt. So I give you an example. So when a person getting out of prison or getting out the county jail or getting out of juvenile, and your environment calls for like by any means necessary, you got to survive. Everything is labeled right, meaning even if it's wrong. So you don't know right from wrong because everybody you think is right because it's giving you something to supply your physical needs.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's right because it's survival only. It's the only thing you're thinking about is just a moment. And so, and instant gratification too. So you can fit in with instant gratification.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if you get out of jail, somebody will say, man, how you going to be able to get some gym shoes? How you going to be able to get some food? How you going to be able to get this or that? And then they'd be like, well, you need to sell drugs. And then you got people that's already selling drugs and that's their way of living. You want to be just like them or you want to have what they got. You don't want to not fit into this world. And then what they call it is this. They're going to give you a blessing. See, my mind always questioned things at certain points in my life. What I looked at as a blessing for so many years, I questioned it because once I was in jail, I had a chance to like start looking at things for the truth. I'm like, was that a blessing or a curse? Because that's going to get you locked up. It's going to make you lose everything.
But looking back now, I think, and this is my own perception, coming from a guy who can't sit still, putting you in jail was almost a blessing in disguise because that gave you the moment to actually see you. And that's the what happened moment. It took multiple jailings, and we could go into all the crazy stuff that you've done, but I'm more interested in like that epiphany moment when you're like, I have to change the system. I got to do an about face. I got to do a 180 and start plowing upstream versus going with the flow. Because the flow was just go do more of this. And what caused that? What took place?
My mind, right? So my mind always started talking to me about stuff. It started I questioned myself.
Yeah.
So I was like, why am I thinking like this? This literally what took place in my mind. Like, why am I thinking like this? Why am I having remorse? Why am I having regret? Why am I feeling guilty? And I'm supposed to be this person that everybody say that I'm supposed to be. They loving this person according to the way you think love is.
Mm-hmm.
And I question like, why am I talking positive stuff and then I turn around and do the opposite? You know, because that's what I used to do in prison. I used to talk about positive things. I used to gather people around and start little groups and organizations inside the jail. I used to always break out of the norm, but yet I would succumb to getting right back into the norm.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to not fit in when I didn't fit in anyway. And so, like it's a saying, right, for GDs, it was in the 90s. They started saying it a lot because I was in a organization that was called Growth and Development, but it used to be Gangster Disciple, right?
Yeah.
And so they had a lot of master manipulators, and they had a lot of things that was above my mind, my head, right? But then they'll say things like, they have a meeting and we all stuffed into a little room, a little cell room, and like 20 guys, and they'll be like, all right, we letting y'all know right now, whoever don't wanna, do whatever we doing, this and that, y'all can either plug in, plug out, or get kicked out. So that means like either you're gonna get with the program or you can leave right now. Because if you plug out right now on your own volition, you're not gonna be looked at as like wrong or bad. And in my mind, it was like this, man, I'm ready, man. I'm tired of this garbage. I'm ready to do my own thing. I don't want to keep coming in rooms, talking to other guys that's not showing me the same stuff once we leave out the room. They ain't going to be dedicated and committed to the stuff we're talking about. But I wanted to fit in still. So I never left, because in the back of your mind, it's kind of like, okay, if you leave out of here, how you going to look?
Yeah.
What you going to do? Like, who you going to be with? These your buddies. It's all you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was scared. And until I started questioning myself about, okay, I made it to this point in life. Why do most people always talk about that they want to try to do things different, meaning change, but they're afraid to actually do it? And I couldn't keep looking for other people to do what I'm wanting them to do. And Gandhi, the saying, I ran across that in 2003 in prison. And it said, I must be the change. Well, we must be the change we seek to see in the world. I reversed that and I said it to myself a day in the cell. And I was like, I must be the change I seek to see in the world. That means that I can't wait for somebody else to do what I'm called to do. And that's when I stepped out on like vulnerability. I took the walk of shame. Meaning, like, it was shameful to like turn away from everything you once held on to as being your only means for survival. And that means it's gonna be like, you're gonna be like looked down on. And I was willing to be looked down on so I could be looked up on as I'm doing what I'm supposed to do in this world.
That was a pivotal moment. That took a lot of bravery, and probably it was not instant and over with. It was like you had to continue to keep that voice going in your head to walk up versus turning back to what you've done.
Yes.
Because you went right back out into Chicago, right? After you came out, the last time you came out of prison?
Yes. You
came right back into your old neighborhood. People knew Caprice for who Caprice was, or whatever. Do you have a street name or something?
Yeah.
What was your street name?
I had several.
Okay, what were a couple of them?
Well, one of them was Priesky.
Priesky?
Yeah. The Priester.
Okay.
Pre-G.
I love what you and you shared some things when you were talking with David about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And how Caprice was this guy, and like that whole concept is it blows me away that was like a thing, because I have to revisit that movie. But that you guys were like being a little, the mafia man, gangster kind of guys, and
Yep, that's when the real bad stuff started. That was the inception of my criminal organized thought process career. It was because I had the ability to think, right? And I had the ability to not be scared to do anything. So I came up with all the bright ideas, and they just built off of my ideas.
Yeah.
And then when it came to execute, I was the one to execute, and then I would inspire them to execute as well. Meaning like bring the Uzi cap guns and stuff, and let's put them in. Let's go steal the flour out of our cabinets at home, which gonna get us beat at that time. Back then. We get caught stealing, you taking away the food. Like, and y'all playing with this stuff. You playing with the food we buying. And then they found it. But for the school itself, that was a catastrophe. To raid we got raided. They opened all our lockers up and they found fake drugs, guns. That was like, whoa. For sixth graders, that was considered like, and all them guys became, as they grew up, they became hardened criminals. And they had all of the other stuff. Real guns, real everything. And ruining communities. Like we was ruining the community of that school. They kicked me out. I was the leader. I was the chief for the Pee Wee Gangsters.
The Pee Wee Gangsters, I love it.
Yeah, I was 12 years old. And then the next year, it was like the first day of school. All the guys, my understudies, that was my GDs, is like, I'm happy. I'm like, man, it's going to be the best year we ever. I got some great ideas for this year because I'm selling drugs for real now. I'm making money. I got guns. we about to take over. Because the 8th graders always was the ones really like trying to take over. And I was like, we gonna take over. And so, but they had a plan on that day. They said, Caprice Jones, go to the office. I went to the principal's office. I'm sitting there, all my guys coming out the principal's office, and they shaking their head, they crying. They like, man, they want you. I'm like, I ain't did nothing. The whole year, was the school year. I'm just starting back. When I went in there, the principal said, Caprice, you can't be here no more. Everybody told us what you did, what you've been a part of.
They took you out.
They kicked me out, man. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I was mad. I was confused. And I didn't know what to do. I went to right back to that same school, across the street from my uncle high school, which was my dad's high school and my mother's high school, called King High School, Martin Luther King Jr. High School. I went to a place called Florence B. Price, so Price Elementary School. And so I went back to Price in 7th grade. And when I went there mad. I had my mindset to not talk for the whole year because I felt as though I've been railroaded.
Yeah.
Like, why would they send me somewhere I don't want to be? But then a whole new reality kicked in because I became very popular because I was different. And they didn't, like the people that was there, a lot of them remember me from when we was in 2nd grade. Cause I left that school, my mother had a nervous breakdown. So by 3rd grade, that's when I was my last grade there. But now I come back 4 years later and it seemed like a lifetime. And the people that I was in school with, they didn't know me no more because now I'm this whole different person 4 years later that has a whole different influence in this world because we was actually in what was called the gifted classes. So when I first went, I was with the nerds, basically, per se, as that's what they called us.
Yeah.
And then when I went back, I was just in a regular room. I wasn't with my old crew because my grades had changed. I wasn't focused on school.
Yeah.
But they were still there. Some of the girls remember me, but the guys didn't. And I looked at the guys that I used to run with because I was their leader, right? Leader, if you could say like leader of the nerds.
Yeah.
You know, they looked at me as this person that wouldn't even get them the time of day. And all the time, them was my old friends.
So another major shift, kind of call it a trauma if you want, but I think it's interesting to think of all these things you went through, got locked up, should have been locked up, right? You did things to get locked up. I mean,
I got locked up early. I was 12 years old.
Man, the first time.
Yeah.
And then multiple times after that.
Yes, every year.
And so I'm interested in what happened is you're in jail, you're doing some reflection on what you've done, and you made a decision to come out and focus yourself positively. How did you get from there to where you are now, running a nonprofit, changing people's lives, illuminating conversations that help people see themselves and the best parts of themselves and how they interact in the community, what role they play? I mean, you really are doing some amazing things, and something major shifted that catapulted that to where you are now.
My mindset. And literally, I had to learn everything. Like I had to have the what they call like I didn't know. I know it now. You know, neuroplasticity. So that way you rewire your brain. So your brain rewires by you actually intentionally beginning to focus on the things you need to work on in practice, right? So we creatures of habit. I started using those truths as my strengths. So it's like, okay, I'm a creature of habit, but that don't mean that if a person a creature of habit, you can do something different and it becomes a new habit. And then I learned some things along the way. Because my uncle had said this one time, because I had this thing where I didn't respect people property or respect things. If I wanted something, I would just take it. You know, meaning like, I wasn't taking it maliciously though. I take it because I felt that I needed it, you know, like for that moment. And I give it back, you know, whenever I can. And so it was like, he knew this about me as growing up as a kid. So like stealing cars and stuff, that's how I learned how to drive cars, from stealing cars. And so I would take cars and I would take people cars. And he said, one day I remember we pulled over to the gas station. This was once I just got out of prison and stuff. And he knew me because he was my running buddy at this point for years and years and years. We was in prison together. And he was like, he was drunk that night and it was just a habit for him. He get out of his car, because the type of guys he was dealing with too was like, you can't trust nobody, right? I'm his nephew though. And I never seen this. And he pulled the keys out of it. But I'm older now. I'm not going to do that at that point. But he don't know that. He pulled the keys out of his car. And I said it when he got back in the car. I said, man, you pulled when we pulled to the gas station. I was like, man, you took your keys with you, man. But you don't trust me, man. Is you crazy? You think I'm going to take a car? He's like, no, man, that's a healthy habit. See, when he said that, that made me think. Healthy habit. And when I was in prison working on myself, that's how I got exposed to that term that I heard probably throughout my life and I've been focused on it, healthy habit. So that means you can create, if you got bad habits, but you can first got to identify what's bad, you can create healthy habits and it becomes a part of your life. It's just normal. It's a new normal.
Interesting. That's it's interesting how that came to be because you just shifted it because the healthy habit was him doing something that was out of fear and protection, but now it's you've clearly had some time to really meditate and get your act in gear with all this stuff, and then you've become like self-aware enough to say I am somebody and I can not only change who I am, but you can make change for other people. And you've told the story about St. Luke's, right? Is it St. Luke's?
Yep.
And then somebody there who pushed you, I think you told me this about a pastor there or somebody you were working with, and you expressed your dream to have an organization and do more, and this person pushed you to do it. And that's where Fountain of Youth became, right?
Yeah, well, it was two words that he said. No, well, it was one word, actually. He said, absolutely. Because I asked him this. I said, I told him the vision I received that morning in 2016 to start a nonprofit, but I didn't even understand nothing about it. It was just like the beginning stages of his conception, right? And I said, it was a staff meeting, and I shared the vision with him, and he's like, wow, Caprice, that's amazing. Because it took 2 hours to share this vision that poured before my eyes.
Yeah.
And he was like, that's amazing, man. I say, do you think that's something I should pursue? Now, when I said this, everything is on the line if I pursue this. What you think was on the line if I pursued it? Like if I'm talking about this massive vision in the early inception though, but it's a massive vision, meaning like it's never ending.
Yeah.
And that means like, what's the cost for me to pursue that? What's the first thing that's in jeopardy?
Your income, your work, where you're
My job,
you're currently
exactly,
employed
exactly.
somewhere, and you have to change it all. Yeah, interesting.
It's
That's a big threat because that's how you put Wheaties in the bowl in the beginning. Yeah, that's how you put food on the table. I mean, that's what you. Yeah.
It's a whole lot came with this vision. So it was like, he said absolutely, and I said, well, if he's supporting me, then I got support that I need to make it happen without losing everything and not having like it's not a bad idea.
So he believed in what you told him.
But 2 years later, after he was the founding board member, he started telling people this. This when I wasn't even at the job no more. Because I had to leave the job. He said, when Caprice first told me that vision, I told him, yeah, you should pursue it. He said, I thought he was just joking though. I wasn't.
No.
Anything I put my mind to, I don't stop until it's over.
Yeah. I want to fast forward. I don't want to skip anything, but I want so people who are watching this and are getting to maybe see you for the first time and don't fully understand. So what Caprice has done through the Fountain of Youth, and this is my perception and my interaction, and I've been involved in ways and seen what you've done, and I see it maybe from my perspective, but you've created a safe place in our community for people to come, be vulnerable, and educate themselves and open their eyes to the opportunity that lies for them that they might not otherwise see. And, bridging people out of, this is beautiful. Kevin Molina got this for me for Christmas. The bridge of poverty, the bridging the gap, because people have a mindset, like you've had a mindset, and that all had to change, and that was a scary thing. But you're creating a place where you can share conversations with a pretty wide variety of people sitting in that room. Your Tuesday night talks, Real Talk, incredible, program that keeps running. You got Partners in Change. When you can elaborate on what that is exactly, but Partners in Change is a place where you're putting people through a program. They're saying, I'm willing for change. I want change in my life. And you're saying, well, here's a path. And you're challenging them to meet and follow a set of guidelines that will at least show that they're willing to make the next step and the next move. What else are you doing? What other opportunities are being provided through the Fountain of Youth to help other people?
Well, community and change. So community and change helps the other side of it, right? Those that have never been in poverty. Those that
Okay.
have never even experienced people in poverty.
Ah,
So community and change is a program that was inspired by City Councilwoman Laura Roussel.
yep.
Just from passing by back in 2020 when the George Floyd situation was just happening, and we was passing by in the alley. She was coming from Washington Park, and I was going to the Fountain of Youth, and we bumped heads. And she was like, "Caprice, what's going on in the country right now?" And I'm like, "I mean, it's a lot." And she was like, "I don't even understand white privilege or none of those things. Like, I don't understand." And I'm like, "I mean, but everybody know about this." And I'm like, she was like, "But not everybody, because I don't, and a lot of people I know don't." And she was like, "Could you create something where you can educate us and teach us?" And I was
Interesting.
like, "All right, I see." And then 2 weeks later, that's when we started Community and Change.
And where is that taking place, and how is that working?
Well,
What do you
it's
do?
it takes place at the Fountain Youth Program, in our programming space, but also it's taking place on Zoom. So it's customized for whatever company or business or organization that wants to use it. Back then, Laura Roussel was one of the people that did it as a one-on-one.
Okay.
But right now, my life is so busy; it's hard for me to do one-on-ones now.
Yeah.
And so she did it. Several of my board members, but we're training right now. The police department of Dubuque today is actually the first cohort of the year for this year. We had a contract for 2 years, and it's basically to try to bridge the gap between the misunderstanding of we're all in this together.
Yep.
And so we have people that's from the community that has been criminals, that has had misunderstandings with the police, and also those people they now wants to help understand the police better, and the police want to help understand them better. And it's like bringing everybody together to for human education, basically.
This is one of the reasons I think you are one of the most valuable people, not only in our community but in this world that we're living in right now, is because you have the dynamic to create that conversation. Because we live in this such imbalance of place. I could run into somebody who I've known in the community, respect them, they're great people, they're business owner. I run into them at Menards, let's say, and they don't think twice about throwing the N-word out. And they view black people through a lens that they've only got, and they're from this community, still somebody who I think is a good person, but they don't understand because they've never had exposure to this world. And I brought that up when I said, the Section 8 program kind of brought you here. You mentioned that when you were talking with David about your wife was seeking a voucher and thought, hey, let's go to Dubuque. And that kind of like is what brought you to Dubuque. And there's people who I can talk to in my group of people I know who think the Section 8 program is the worst thing that ever happened to Dubuque. It brought in the wrong kind of people into this community and everything else. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I just think that they have that one perspective. And they're not able, and was the bigger problem we're reaching right now with our with humanity, is that we can't hold opposing views at the same time while seeing and having a conversation. You can't have that. It's like you're either with me or you're not, or you're against me. And what you've created is an opportunity to put a lot of people from different backgrounds, different upbringings, to seek to understand the person that you're sitting across from. I've never had your experience. I've never been in your shoes. I've never felt the pressures or the traumas or the experiences or the difficulties you've had to face. I've had my own, and I'd love to share, but like I also want to learn. And so like people they're just stuck in their own story. And I'm, as a human, I'm given my experience of what I think you are. And so you have, in my experience, so last year, like to give a personal note, I had a rough time. And I started coming in to see you and coming into the Real Talk and Tuesday nights, just seeing people who are at different levels, and you are having a provocative conversation about one topic. So, give an example of a topic that would be discussed, or like, what does it mean to be in community or something? What's a good example of something you'd talk about? A question you'd pose to have the group discuss.
I mean, well, just recently, like, I could just make it so simple. Like last week, our topic was, do you believe the impossible is possible?
Okay.
Do you believe the impossible is possible? And we dive in, we take a deep dive into it from different perspectives, and also from different angles of seeing what it means to each person. But the unique part is that we all on one accord. Is that we are there because we all want to learn something new. Mm-hmm. Now that's interesting, because that's the type of space that I've created, which is people that want to change. They have a safe space to actually see what it means to change with other people that want to change too. Yeah. And they coming from different directions. Everybody don't agree with nothing. Like, everybody can't agree with everything the same way we see it initially, but we get a chance to do some critical thinking.
I mean, sitting in that room, you've got people who are really well educated, and you've got people who are coming in there with not a dime to their name, just getting out of, lockup.
Well, out of a cardboard box sometimes.
Just getting out of a cardboard box. People who are in a wheelchair, living off of public assistance, people who are, and then there's police officers in public servants in the same room, nurses, doctors, having a conversation about things, and everyone coming from their perspective. So I guess that kind of speaks and spews into this community and change, is that you're giving. I caught such a glimpse. I brought my daughter multiple times, and she'd sometimes be out in the conversation, but she'd be in the toy room enjoying herself with other kids.
And now we got the director of child care at Mercy Hospital. So if you want to bring her back, she got somebody to watch her.
Somebody who keep an eye. She's pretty good at entertaining herself. But I think that's the power of what you're doing. And then, not even to get into the other piece of where we connected with the TNP, the Nantucket Project. I mean, what an incredible group, and what they've been able to achieve, that you're part of a documentary film. Like, we could probably do a 2-hour long form here. And we probably took a lot of time on the early stuff, which we have to do too, to get people to understand where you came from. But like, to put a bow in this is like, because I know we're going to run out of time here, but what it was like. You had your experience, tough life, really interesting things that you could have gone a certain way, and just continue to be part of that system that's been created in this country that gobbles people up and doesn't let them free. And not only the system of law enforcement and I don't want to use the wrong terminology, but basically locking people up and not giving them opportunities to rework their life, that incarceration cycle. But you broke your cycle, and now you're creating an opportunity where you see that there's a missing link to put people into your flywheel of, if you want a boost, here's the boost, but here are your requirements of you and where you need to go. So, like, Fountain of Youth is continuing to grow. You're in what, year 4?
Year 8.
Year 8?
Yeah.
Wow. I've only known about it for 4 years. So
that's when we met.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So 8 years, and you're continuing to add programs, bring people in to run pieces. Grant is incredible. I've seen the work he's doing, and it's just fantastic. You're going out to the jail. You're doing so much, and because you're a doer, you're an action guy. What's your vision? Like, if you were to say you have a vision for where this can go, and it's beyond you, beyond where you sit, you're gone. Everything is, you've laid some groundwork, you've built some building blocks, but like, if the Fountain of Youth is carrying on without you, your family's alive, but you're gone, what does that look like to you? Like, I'm just kind of teeing up a vision for where the future of this lies, for the work that you've laid out.
Is that it's a household name that continues to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And that's a whole process in itself. So it's always continuously growing and expanding, and it's learning every step of the way as an organic force in this community and throughout the country, and throughout the world. I've had some invites. We got a partnership in Vietnam where people was actually doing real talk in Vietnam. But we also, I got invited recently to go to Africa. I don't want to go though, because
like
I don't like planes. So, but the thing is really to be a loud voice for someone to always know that it is a safe space, wherever the Founding Youth Program is at.
Mm.
And really just to piggyback, just to put the bow on everything, is when you had said about like when I was in prison and I got out of prison and I started helping people and like doing some, like doing stuff for other people. What prompted me to do stuff for other people is that in prison I realized something, that my life is not for me. My life is purpose greater than myself. And that meant that's what gave me a reason to want to live and not just continue to exist. I truly believe that what's greater than a human is your purpose. I live according to purpose now. And when I live according to purpose, that's constantly being developed and revealed and it's unfolding. And it's not about me. So sometimes I don't even eat until later on the night. Or that's not important to me no more, when that was the only thing I probably thought was important.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about me as a person. It's about why I was put here in this world. And that was to help many other people.
Mm-hmm.
Know that they got something to do.
And using your story as a relational point, because a lot of people who are suffering or are going through difficult things can relate to where you've been. Your rock bottom is relatable because you're meeting people at that place. And then you're showing them through your success. I mean, you've transformed as an individual and you're doing great things and you're inspiring people. And that's amazing. Like, that's incredible. You inspire me. You've walked me back. You've walked me back when I've been upset, walked into your office and I'm like, what? Oh, now I see. You're dissecting words and you're saying, no, but I looked up the definition to this and it means this. And so that means, it's like, I never had that perspective. So changing the mindset, changing people's perspective. I mean, I think that to know you is a privilege, but just to know the work that you're doing and what it's doing for our community, you cannot put a value to that. You cannot, people can't, anyone who's invested in what Fountain of Youth is doing is making an investment in so much more than you're able to actually put down on paper. The return on investment is big for what Fountain of Youth is doing. So I'm a big believer. I love what you're doing in this community. I want to talk more with you about more of the things that are very specific to what's happening and what people want in this community and out of this community, especially with, Central Corridor and what the talk of transforming that, et cetera. But I think we're gonna have to wrap today and just tee up another conversation. So
Absolutely. Kyle, I love you. And I always know that whenever you want to talk, I'm always open to talk. And whenever you invite me back, I'll come back.
Oh man, love you too. All right.
Yep. All
Thank
right.
you.